Hello and welcome to the recorded version of the webinar, What You Need to Know About Deliverability. I'm your presenter, Andrew Barrett, Senior Director of Deliverability and ISP Relations for Real Magnet. Today we're going to be talking about a broad range of deliverability topics in general, but we'll also take a moment here and there to look at specific aspects of the Real Magnet application where you can actually put into practice some of the more broader topics we'll be talking about today. Those topics include sender reputation, spam and block lists, and also whitelists, bounce management and list hygiene, other email best practices, and in the live version of the webinar, participants would have the opportunity to have their questions answered immediately. We'll be presenting this webinar on an ongoing basis, live and online, so please feel free to join us for any of those if you have specific questions about deliverability, or you can simply email them today to support@realmagnet.com. Provisioning is the first step in getting started with high-volume email. Real Magnet provides the technical platform that you need to manage frequent high-volume email. And when I say high-volume, I mean more than a few hundred recipients. If you've ever tried to manage a list of even that very small size on a desktop application like Outlook, you probably know how quickly that task can become cumbersome to manage. You, as the sender, provide the recipients, the content of your email messages, and the marketing strategy. The first deliverability decision we'll make is whether to set you up on a dedicated IP address where you have your very own IP address and no other mail goes out from it, or we may put you in a shared environment, an IP pool of 2 or more IP addresses that are typically shared with other Real Magnet clients. Let me take a step back a moment and explain exactly what I mean when I say IP address. Very simply, an IP address is a unique numerical identifier for every computer, or in this case, mail server, that's connected to the internet. We'll assign you a dedicated IP address if you're sending very high volumes, like 70,000 recipients or more a couple of times a week. Or if you're a low sender, fewer than perhaps 2,000 recipients sending once or twice a month, we may decide to place you in a shared IP pool. We also provide email authentication protocols for all of your email, and that simply is an automated way to let an ISP or a recipient domain know that Real Magnet is in fact authorized to send email on your behalf. So we authenticate your mail with one or more protocols so that they know the mail really is coming from you and not someone pretending to be you. We provide on our platform automatic throttling for each individual ISP. We send your mail as fast as each ISP is willing to receive it. ISPs typically publish the maximum rate at which we can connect to them and present your mail for delivery. So we automatically throttle our sending speed for the best possible efficiency and the highest possible deliverability. So provisioning is just the first piece of the puzzle. There's much more that each sender can do to affect their own deliverability rate. And the first concept we'd like to address for the senders today is reputation. Reputation is a pretty easy concept, but it's a pretty important one for senders to understand. A sender reputation is like a credit score. The higher your score, the easier generally things become. Your sender reputation is associated with the IP address that we talked about earlier, from which your email originates. It is not associated with your company. It is not associated yet with your domain like mybrand.com. It is associated with an IP address. And just like a credit score, there are a number of different companies that are in the business of gathering data from which they produce the score and then publishing that score back out to ISPs so they can use that data along with a bunch of other data to make automated decisions about how to handle your mail when it's presented for delivery. The most widely used reputation score provider expresses your reputation score as a number between 0 and 100, with 100 being the best. I've gotten a couple of examples put together here for you. On the left is an example of the sender score of a Real Magnet client. has a very good reputation score. On the right is actually the reputation score of an email that I fished out of my junk folder for the express purposes of creating a bad example. So one thing I wanted to point out on these examples are these graphs. If you take a close look, you'll see that reputation score changes with sender volume. So when you see sender volume increase all of a sudden, the reputation score takes a dip. It recovers, and you'll see here another dip and a recover. But here's your first takeaway for the webinar. When you're getting started, ramp up to your full volume. Don't send to your full list at the same time in the same send. You want to give ISPs a chance to get a look at your mail stream before you start sending full bore. ISPs want to make sure that a suddenly very noisy corner of the internet hasn't been taken over by a spammer or has been infected by some type of a mail sending virus. So they're very leery when they see big, huge changes in sender volume. One of the best things you can do is try to keep your volumes as consistent as you can. Obviously, there are times like during the holidays when your volumes are going to increase, and ISPs know this. So as consistent as possible without making any big changes to your own business requirements. So what can senders do to get and keep a good sender reputation? Well, consistency and volume was one of the first things we talked about. First of all, you want to get permission from your recipients to minimize complaints. Send only to those folks who have specifically asked for your mail. Remember, spam is not about the content of your message. It's about consent from the recipient. ISPs want to keep their recipient's business, so they only want to deliver the mail that the recipient wants. Real Magnet will automatically suppress future email to recipients who submit spam complaints. We don't often want to interfere with your data and with your lists, but that is one of the occasions in which we will automatically make a change. We'll suppress users that submit spam complaints. Send only what you told your recipients you said you'd be sending. If you ask permission to send association industry news, for example, don't start sending real estate investment opportunities. That will also increase complaints. So you want to lower the number of attempts to send email to addresses that actually don't exist, and we'll talk about that more in bounce management. That's part of good list hygiene. And send relevant, engaging mail to willing recipients. Just as sending that mail to willing recipients is good for engaging your recipients, the converse is also true. Irrelevant mail perpetuates disengagement. ISPs see when their recipients are not interacting with their email, and they take that into consideration when they make decisions about how to handle your email. So what are we talking about when we talk about sending relevant mail? Well, you want to send mail to the right recipients, permission, at the right time, at the promised frequency. In other words, when you first gather permission from your recipients, you want to give them an idea of how often you intend to send email, and then you want to meet that expectation. How often do you want to send? Well, you want to send it to them when they're receptive, and that's something you can test. We'll take a look at how to test things like that in just a few minutes. With the right content, you want to send them the content that you promised them that you would be sending, but you also want to take it a step further. You want to send dynamic content. The Real Magnet application has a dynamic content module, and you can use just about every piece of demographic information your sender has provided you with in making that dynamic content. Like personalization, gender, age, that type of thing. And send them interesting content, not just a sales pitch. Certainly you can try to include your offer, and we encourage that, but sometimes just blatant pitches don't really cut it with recipients. They want to see some content that talks more about your area of expertise. If, for example, you're a retailer of Irish and Scottish themed gifts and apparel, perhaps you could include stories and vignettes about things that are happening over in Ireland and Scotland, and then include your offer along with that content. And you want to send relevant mail in the right format. Make sure that it renders well in the broadest range of email clients, including mobile email. Here's an example of what Real Magnet provides in terms of tracking clients. There you see what type of email clients folks are using when they open your mail, how many of them are on mobile, and on what type of mobile devices, or what kind of browsers they're using if they're using a webmail provider like Gmail or Hotmail. We've been talking about recipient engagement. ISPs measure how your recipients interact with your email. They can tell if your email is generally engaging. In some instances, ISPs are presenting the inbox to their customers with mail sorted not by when it was received, but in order of perceived relative engagement to that recipient. Gmail and Hotmail are terrific examples of that. So the more your recipients interact with that mail, the more preferential placement it gets in those inboxes. This is a relatively new trend, but we're seeing it being adopted more and more. The large free inbox providers are actually on the cutting edge, and we expect to see that being adopted more broadly by other mail servers, small and large businesses, etc. And just as engaging mail helps improve your deliverability metrics, unengaged recipients actually create a drag. ISPs see if they are deleting your mail unopened or unread. So what can you do to increase your own recipient engagement? Send them the mail that they asked for. Send them the content that they asked for. And then how do you re-engage recipients who never seem to open your mail? Well, that's a definite challenge. Unengaged recipients are a drag on the performance on your lists, and if they haven't opened or clicked in a few months, consider giving them a rest from the next few sends and come up with a sharp offer in the interim to try and re-engage them. One tactic is to send a survey, and the Real Magnet client natively supports surveys, and draw a winner from the completed surveys for a prize. Amazon gift cards work well. And then ask questions in the survey that might help you improve your content. In spite of these best efforts, if those recipients just don't re-engage, you may want to consider unsubscribing those recipients. Well, how do you find those recipients? Well, we have a very useful reporting tool in the Real Magnet client. You can use the opens report to see who is and isn't opening your mail, and you can do some testing to find out which subject lines get opened more frequently, which from address results in better opens, and if none of those reports quite nail it for you, there's the opportunity to build custom reports in the application. And here's a look at the A/B testing module where you can actually take a look and see what performs best. Here's an example for a Google Analytics webinar Real Magnet recently provided. In this test, highlighted in red is the item that changed in the test, in this case the subject line. And you see that in the second subject line we got a significantly higher open rate just by changing that subject line. It's very hard to know in advance without testing what will do better. So it's a good idea to use the A/B testing module to test as many different things as you can with select small random groups of recipients, find out what does better, and then roll that change out to the rest of your recipients. Now I'd like to talk about bounce management and list hygiene. There's a broad range of different bounce types that you'll see in your email, in your Real Magnet client application. The most common is the generic soft bounce, and that simply means that the ISP has decided to defer or deprioritize your high volume mail probably because they have only limited bandwidth or limited resources, and there's other mail that they know to be more important, like internal mail, that they want to handle first. That is an invitation to try again later. So that's just what Real Magnet does. In the hours following your initial send attempt, Real Magnet will automatically attempt to resend those generic soft bounces a number of times. If after 24 hours you still have some small remainder of generic soft bounces, you can go in to the Real Magnet application and manually send those generic soft bounces. A less common bounce type is the user not found. That simply means that the account that you're trying to reach simply doesn't exist. Now, this is a second of those two occasions in which Real Magnet will actually do something to your data. If we see user not found twice in a row, consecutive sending attempts, with no intervening successes within a 30-day period, we will automatically suppress that user. I didn't do that too well. Let me go it again. 2 failed sends in a row within a 30-day period, Real Magnet will automatically suppress that address because a high number of users not found type bounces will create a hit on sender reputation. You should double check that user address for possible spelling errors. If you've got a sign-up list next to the cash register at the store, it's very possible that there was just a transcription error, and then try it again. But if they continue to bounce user not found, or if the address simply isn't correctable, it's a good idea to suppress. Another bounce type is bad domain. The domain doesn't exist. Very often this is just a temporary issue. The domain registrant, for example, has just failed to renew the registration of their domain in time. When that happens, we'll continue to send mail to that domain as you direct us, in case it's a temporary problem. In the meantime, though, again, check for typos. If you can't correct that domain, if it's not because of a typo, you should consider unsubscribing that domain. Also, check for other bad domain bounces from that same bad domain. That could just mean that the domain is no longer existent. Another type is generic hard bounce. The ISP says that for some technical reason the mail is undeliverable, but they have not specified an exact reason. When we see that type of bounce, we will continue to send to that email address as you direct us, in case it is in fact a temporary technical problem. But check for others from that same domain. It could be an early sign that that ISP or recipient domain is filtering or blocking your mail. And the last bounce type we're looking at is mailbox full. The account is just over quota. Now, we will continue in those instances to send as you direct us to in case the user comes back later and deletes a bunch of mail or buys more storage. However, if you see a long history of mailbox full, you should consider the possibility that the mailbox has simply been abandoned by the recipient. ISPs do watch for persistent attempts to send to mailbox full, and that can be a drag on reputation. So if you see a lot of mailbox full bounces from the same recipient, you should consider unsubscribing that recipient. In the Real Magnet application, you'll see a screen that looks, well, exactly like this, where you can go in to manually resend those generic soft bounces. It's under the Track Message module, and here you click the type of bounce you want to resend, and then go over here to this button and click the Resend Bounces, and we'll make a number of attempts automatically over the next few hours to resend those generic soft bounces. We will not attempt to resend user not found bounces, even if that particular checkbox appears and is selected. The next topic for today is block lists and spam and whitelists. Recall that for ISPs, spam is never about the content of your message. It only has to do with permission. Now, ISPs have no way of measuring whether or not you actually have permission in a technical manner. So they're measuring a whole bunch of other data as a proxy for permission, like the engagement metrics that we described earlier. At some point in your sending career, you will find yourself listed on a block list. It will probably be a mistake. Don't worry, Real Magnet Deliverability will handle that for you. ISPs do rely heavily on block list data to make those filtering decisions, but they're never a binary decision, that is, a simple up and down score. That's very rare. They're using that only as one of a number of data points they take into consideration when making deliverability decisions. So just because you find your IP address is listed somewhere on a block list, don't automatically assume that that's the reason why you may be having deliverability issues. Contact us. We can work with the domains and the block lists to try to get your email unblocked. And the best way, of course, to stay off those block lists is to send only to willing, receptive recipients and keep them that way. Remember, tell them when they sign up what kind of mail they should expect and how often they should expect to get it, and then stick to it. Informed advance consent is your key to success. Next, we're going to look at whitelists. Whitelists are the conceptual inverse of a block list. Whitelist is a list of IP addresses that get a free pass or a partial free pass to some or all of the ISP's normal filtering processes. Not all ISPs and sending domains maintain a whitelist. In many instances, if we discover that a receiving domain is inadvertently blocking your mail, we will put in a request with them to whitelist. But be warned, it's going to take some effort to make a whitelisting stick. Whitelisting agreements are never considered by the ISP to be a permanent arrangement. If they, for some reason, begin to believe that your mail is no longer permission-based, for example, they can revoke that whitelisting, and often without notice or warning. You can also do whitelisting on a more local level, on a user-by-user basis. You can ask your recipients in the content of your message to whitelist your mail locally by adding your from address to their address book or contacts folder. Or you can ask the IT department to send a request to their own IT folk to whitelist your mail. Unsubscribe management. We mentioned this earlier. Ignored unsubscribe requests hurt deliverability, so we manage that function for you automatically. There's a law on the books. You may have heard of it. It's called CAN-SPAM. CAN-SPAM requires a working unsubscribe mechanism to be included with each and every email you send out. So we do that here automatically. That same law also requires you to honor those unsubscribe requests within 10 days. In Magnet Mail, if a user clicks on your unsubscribe link, that unsubscription happens immediately. Now, in Real Magnet, you have the option of unsubscribing users from one group or from all of your groups. You can segment your list as many different ways as you want to, and you can have recipients appear on one or more groups. And so you have the option then of unsubscribing a user who clicks on that unsubscribe link from just the group that they were sent to when they received the unsubscribe link, or to all of your groups. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. It depends on your particular business requirements. You can also link groups so that unsubscribing one will unsubscribe the recipients from just those groups that are linked. This is a terrific feature that not many users actually take advantage of. It's really worth your time to take a look at it. Here's an example of where you might want to employ this strategy. Let's say that you have groups of recipients who are set up to receive mostly promotional email, offers, coupons, things of that nature. But you also have groups of recipients who are just receiving newsletters, updates of what's going on in your industry, things that are happening at your store. You may not want to unsubscribe your recipient from both types of email. If they've unsubscribed from one of your promotional emails, you may link all of your promotional groups together so that that user will no longer receive any type of promotional email, but they'll still still continue to receive your newsletters. It's very useful. From time to time, you'll get an email directly to you personally, not a click on an unsubscribe link, and it says that I never want to see mail from you ever again. When that happens, those unsubscribes need to be done manually. They still need to be done within those 10 days. So you'll have to go into the Real Magnet application and manage that unsubscription manually. You may have heard me use the term suppression. Unsubscribing and suppressing really aren't interchangeable terms. An unsubscription is a one-time event. Someone unsubscribes from your email, or one type of email in the case of linked groups, but they may continue to receive other types of your email, or they may opt at some time in the future to resubscribe and resume receiving your email. That's unsubscribe. Suppression is when no matter what else happens, or no matter what else the user does, that email address will never receive email from you ever again. Suppressed addresses are kept inside the Real Magnet application. They're not marked as suppressed until you drill down on the details of that recipient, but they do not receive your email even when they still appear in some of your groups. And even if they attempt to resubscribe, they'll continue to be suppressed. Now, if you've been using some other solution in the past and you already have a list of email addresses that you need to have suppressed and have continued to be suppressed, you can just upload those lists directly into the Real Magnet client so you don't have to start from scratch. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about deliverability testing. We have two flavors of deliverability testing in the Real Magnet application. There's standard deliverability testing and an enhanced module. And you can use both of these to identify possible deliverability issues before you actually send that mail out. It looks at usability, things that might degrade the user experience like broken links or images that don't appear. It takes a look at 3 different spam scoring modules that are quite popular on the internet. We run them through those content filters and return data on how well your message did. And it'll show how your email is rendered in the most popular email clients, the big free inbox providers, and a few more besides. Here's a screenshot from the standard deliverability testing module. Here you'll see a problem with a broken link, as an example. If we were to click on the red button in the application, it would give you more details about exactly what went wrong with that link. And in this particular example, we saw that all the images loaded correctly. There was no problem with importing messages from Microsoft Word, which can cause problems. Message size is deemed to be acceptable, and overall downloads nice and quick. Here you see the results of the spam check. We've run it through Spam Assassin. We run it through Postini, and Postini thinks there might be a problem. Again, click on that red button and we'll get more details on what might have gone wrong. And we also run it through Brightmail. This way you get a chance to see your content the same way that an ISP will see it, and you can test your message out to see how well it should do in terms of deliverability. Now here's a screenshot from our enhanced deliverability testing module, and you see here's the broadest possible range of renderings in all the different email clients, even down to mobile. Here's how it looks on BlackBerry, which does not do HTML. That's why we're not seeing the same picture that we see in these other clients. And here's an iPad, very popular, becoming of ever more increasing importance. iPhone also, big user segment are looking at your email on an iPhone. So let's add it all up. It's difficult to understate how important it is to deliver relevant mail to permission-based recipients with the content that they want to see. That, in a nutshell, is what engagement and deliverability and reputation is all about. Use the Real Magnet client to track how your recipients are interacting with your email and test out different content to see what kind of improvements you can make to that interaction. Improvements to how often they are clicking to open the mail and clicking through on the links that are contained within your mail. And roll out those improvements to the rest of your recipient base. Remember, the more willing, engaged recipients you have, the better your reputation will be, and the better your deliverability becomes. The cycle really does feed itself. And if you have any questions, Real Magnet support and deliverability are always available to help you answer them, even if you're not a Real Magnet client. So feel free to send email to support@realmagnet.com. And with any luck, I'll get a chance to answer your questions live at our next deliverability webinar. Thank you very much for your time.